Now, I've never made a all-time favorites book video, and that is primarily because it is very daunting to make a video like that. I don't know how to start by saying these are my top 5 or top 3 or top 10 books, because frankly, I don't know if they are, because I've only read 62 books in the past 2 years. I am not an experienced reader, and I'm sure that even though I can say that these are going to be my favorite books, I don't know if they're still going to be my favorite books. But nonetheless, I'm bored and I want to make a video. So these are some of my favorite books so far in my reading journey. Let's start. And remember, none of these are in order. These are not in order. And yeah, so they're not in order. Just because I present this next one does not mean it is my favorite book of all time. I don't know why I have such a fear of being judged. Anyways, let's move on. My first favorite book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book is about two friends. They met as children in a hospital, and they are connected fundamentally by their love of video games. One day, in their final years of college, they decide that they're going to make a video game, and it's just for fun. It's just, if they make it and it does well, then it does well, and if it doesn't do well, then they can move on with their lives. And they both go to Ivy League schools, so they have their future set out for them, but they just want to do one last thing, because not only do they now have the experience to make a video game, but they still have that passion, and that is what the entire storyline is centered around. The reason why I love this book so much is not only because of the interesting characters, not only is it because of the quirky character dynamics between our two protagonists and even the side characters that join them on their journey, but I love this book because it is full of this feeling of boundless potential. It feels limitless. It feels like your 20s, because your 20s are meant to be a time when you're meant to discover yourself, when you're meant to find interests and hobbies and future avenues. Anything is possible. That's the old truism, and maybe a bit of a cliche, but this book really does make it feel like anything is possible, as if you could just pursue your creative dreams and succeed. And what this book suggests is that you should pursue your passions for the fun of it. Obviously, don't pursue your passions and put all your money into it, because that might be detrimental for you in the future, and that's the reality of following a creative dream. But the fact that they are able to just say, you know what, let's do it for the sake of doing it and because we love it, and if it doesn't turn out well, then we still have our backup, like we have our futures to go on to. But if it does turn out well, it could be the best decision of our lives. That is such an infectious energy that comes off of this book. And being someone who is currently 21, I do get that feeling, so there is a bit of a bias here, but I think nonetheless, even if you are not 21 or 20, this book will be really entertaining and really engaging for you, and probably, like for me, very inspirational too. I love this book. Now, my next favorite book, and not my second favorite book, remember there's no order to these things, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Viktor E. Frankl was a psychiatrist during World War II, and this book is essentially a series of accounts of his experiences in concentration camps during World War II. And this entire book is basically just a presentation of how humans find meaning in suffering, how humans find a purpose when they're stripped away of everything else. And it's a heavy one. It is a heavy one, and it's daunting because it's non-fiction, but I do want you to bear with me, because the reason why I want you to read this book is because, firstly, the accounts of his experiences are so compelling and so engaging and so vivid. Obviously, we've all heard of the terrors and the tragedies of the Holocaust. We know that in general it's quite a terrible thing that has happened in history. But to get first-hand accounts, not only from one prisoner, but also these accounts are from the perspective of a psychiatrist, somebody who's an expert in medicine, someone who's an expert in psychology. And why it's so engaging is because he ties all of these experiences into his wider argument of how people find meaning and purpose in suffering. When they're stripped away of everything, how can they still look forward to things? How can they still live on? Another reason why I love this book, and it's probably one of my biggest ones, is the fact that it doesn't try to be a self-help book at all, but it is a self-help book Viktor E. Frankl didn't initially want to publish this book. He didn't want it to be public at all, and it was only his colleagues and his friends that pushed him to eventually put his name on the cover. But he initially just wanted it to be produced anonymously. He wanted to provide an account of how people adapted in those conditions and how they found meaning, and hopefully, and that's what he hoped, that it would inform later audiences of the resilience of the human spirit. And that's such a beautiful thing to foreground in your book. And I think that for audiences like us who will probably never go through conditions as horrific as those in the concentration camps, we can still find some value in this, that even if people in those conditions can be stripped away of everything but still find meaning and still find purpose and some reason to live, then perhaps we can too. And that's very inspirational. My next favorite book, and it's a good one, it's a contrast to the previous one, The Memory Book by Lara Avery. The Memory Book is about a girl named Samantha who was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease that leads her to forget things. And it is a fiction, but the reason why I have to clarify that it is a fiction is because it sounds very real. This book is essentially a series of journal entries by her. So it's called The Memory Book, and it's sort of treated as sort of a journal. Essentially, this whole book is treated as a journal, and it's basically her writing down her experiences with the disease and kind of her attitudes and perspectives towards it. Now, being a very young protagonist, she is very witty. She is very angsty too, and rightfully so. She's diagnosed with a debilitating disease, but you can see the youth shining from her. You can see her reactions are very, very typical of how you and I, for example, a young audience might deal with a situation like that. And even though the book is very witty at the start and very funny and gives you a couple of laughs, it eventually becomes very sad when you see that in her journal entry she begins to forget things. She begins to be very forgetful. It starts off with, oh, I'm not sure what I did yesterday, all the way to her not being sure who her boyfriend is, who her parents are. She forgets people, and it becomes really, really deep and really, really serious. What I love about this book is that it feels very personal. Because of the way that it's written in journal entries, it feels like you are there with her, as if you're there sitting beside her bed and experiencing with her. Because when she starts to forget things, it's like she's telling you that she's forgetting things. And why that's so powerful is because you've been with her on this journey as well. So you are aware of everyone's significance to her. You are aware of who she is, of what certain things are and what they mean to her. But she begins to forget those things. And it's like you're trying to hold on to them for her. And that's very engaging. It's very engaging because it holds on to you as a reader. And that's why it was so emotional. And even as someone like me, I don't really feel that much like sadness for sad endings in the media. I don't know, I just can't. But for this book, it really hit home because it just feels like it was very real. It feels like I was there with my best friend and I could see their memories disappearing. So it was a great read. It does seem long, but you'll fly by. You will fly by. It's not a hard read at all. And it's a great book. Thank you, Ivy, for recommending me this and giving it to me. Now, my next favorite book, and I'm starting to realize that a lot of my favorite books have a very, very common themes. When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. When Breath Becomes Air is a biography and then an autobiography of the life of Paul Kalanithi. It details his experiences with med school, of his residency, and then later on his experience of being a neurosurgeon. Now, it's more than just those recounts because tragically we find out that towards the end of his residency he's diagnosed with one of the most aggressive forms of brain cancer, and it's a tragic irony because he is trying to be a neurosurgeon and here he is being stopped by brain cancer. So this book is a non-fiction, so it's him telling his experiences of it, but it's also more than just his experiences with med school. It is also his experiences with treatment and how he sort of grapples with the reality that death is coming, and it is coming very, very fast for him. And It is a very somber read, but it's also very interesting, and it's written in a way where you are more inclined to celebrate his life rather than mourn the loss of him. But the reason why I especially love this book is because he speaks in a way that is very accessible. So it's very easy to read, and I read it all in one day, and I don't really read books in one day. I've only read like 3 books in one day, but this was one of them. And he writes in such a calm and collected way as well. For a man who is facing death, and for a man who will not live to see much of his life develop, he writes in such a way that feels like he's desperate to get these messages out, to educate people. And that is so inspirational as a medical professional, because all he wanted to do was help people, and all he wanted to do was enjoy medicine and enjoy the life of helping people. You can really see the contrast between being a medical professional and being the patient. And he talks about this too, the differences between those two worlds. It's so underrated, I think. I've never seen it on anybody's favorite books, so I really think you should read it. A great piece of non-fiction. And finally, my last favorite book, not my least favorite book, my last favorite book, and it's not in order, remember, it's not in order. The Little Prince, specifically The Little Prince and the addition of A Letter to a Hostage at the end. I think that's very important. You need to buy the two together. It's all in one book, and yeah, I got this off Amazon. It's just a very complete book. Essentially, what The Little Prince is about is, it's a children's story, essentially. It's a children's story, and it's about an astronaut, or not an astronaut, but the Little Prince himself, a space-traveling The Little Prince. He crash lands on a planet, and he speaks with a narrator about his adventures throughout the universe and what he has seen. Now, what you should know is that this book, yeah, it is a children's book, but it's written in a way where the best way to explain it is like a grown-up who is confiding in children, as if he's reading to a group of children, but he's also giving them advice about how to deal with grown-ups, essentially. Like he's a child himself, but in a grown-up's body, and he's explaining how to deal with the world of grown-ups. That's how The Little Prince is written. I can give you a bit of a excerpt. Again, you might say to them, the proof that the Little Prince existed is that he was enchanting, that he laughed, and that he was looking for a sheep. When someone wants a sheep, it is proof that they exist. The grown-ups will merely shrug their shoulders and treat you like a child. That is how they are. You must not hold it against them. Children have to be quite indulgent when it comes to grown-ups. So it's like he's just speaking to you on how to deal with grown-ups, and that is so lovely, because fundamentally this book is centered around themes of friendship, and it's centered around themes of rarity, and how there are certain things in life that you can't just lose, and you can't just trade for something else. There are only a few things in life where you only have it once and you can't get it back. And that's why it's so beautiful, because they're very innocent topics and they're very childlike topics, but they're topics that are still very relevant to us as grown-ups now, because you know, our relationships are very important to us, and we need to learn to value them, because we are all getting older and we won't have each other for eternity, and often relationships do fade. Sorry, it got really depressing there, but that is the reality. But this book, The Little Prince, kind of brings you back and talks to your inner child about what it was, and it reminds you of the value of friendship. Now, the second part of the book is A Letter to a Hostage, and the reason why I want you to get the version with A Letter to a Hostage is because where the first bit is a children's book, where it talks a bit childlike and it's like a grown-up confiding in children, Letter to a Hostage is as if the grown-up is talking to the grown-up, so it's talking to the adult version of you now. Letter to a Hostage is essentially an open letter to all hostages during the war that was going on that informed this book, but it's more specifically towards the author's friend. Okay, he lost a dear friend, and that friend was in prison, and he hasn't heard from him since. The Little Prince and The Letter to a Hostage are both for this friend. It's about the fact that no matter where you are in the world, we will be intimately connected because of our friendship. And A Letter to a Hostage is essentially a philosophical breakdown of that. It's him talking about his own experiences with war and with friendship and with people. And he recounts the times that he was with his friend. They are very adult topics, so the reason why I think it's a complete book is because it guides you through, it talks to you from all walks of life, from when you're a child all the way up to when you're an adult. And it was just such a touching read, and it really connected with me. And I love this book. And that is all. Thank you for listening to me speak about these 5 books that are some of my favorite books of all time, not my top 5 favorites. Hopefully they helped. And okay, thanks for watching.